Sorry that he moves around. Like, actually, you know what? Let me do something here. Just give me a minute, and I don't normally do this a lot. When I think I do it every once in a while, just to kind of show you, just to show. I've been handling venomous snakes for many years, so again, don't try this at home. Okay, so see right in front of his eye that like pit, that kind of hole, that's his heat sensing pit. And if you look at the other side, maybe the other side is a little better, right there. See that? Yeah. So that's the heat sensing pit. And then, see, very defined hourglass or Hershey's Kisses. And sometimes they're not fully connected. Sometimes they look like that. Sometimes they are fully connected. You know, it's like fingerprints. Everybody has different patterns, and every copperhead has a different pattern. And sometimes that in the wild. Now you see how his eye right there, because the light shining, is all of a sudden now looking very cat-like, vertical. See that? So again, and now you can sort of see his fang coming out of there too. So this is what a typical copperhead looks like. Now, different, you know, depending on what part of the state, they can be a little bit darker, they can be a little bit browner, they can be a little bit redder, a little bit more copper. But generally speaking, they call them copperheads because the head has, oops, more of that copper tone. But they can be copper all the way down. Now, remember I was telling you about how to tell the cloaca or the single scales? So right there, that right there is the cloaca. So it's single, 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 cloaca continues to be single scale all the way down till the tip, row of scales. Okay. So that is a copperhead. So more than likely, where you guys are in what county again? I forget. I know you told me, but I can't remember. Mostly located where, in a western part of the state?
No, Charlottesville.
Charlottesville.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys are, yeah, Albemarle, Charlottesville. You guys may actually, well, you're in timber rattlesnake territory. But when you go on hikes, depending on where you go, if you were to run into a venomous snake, it more than likely is going to be. Uh-oh. Did I lose you guys? Uh-oh. Oh,
No, we're here. We're here.
Okay, good. I thought I lost you. Everything froze. I'm like, uh-oh. But more than likely, it is going to be a copperhead, but it also a rattlesnake. Now, let me show you this this corn snake again, because just to really pinpoint the difference. And by the way, corn snakes are called corn snakes for a couple of reasons. If you look at the underbelly of this, it looks like maize, doesn't it? Like the old corn, you know, before we domesticated corn and turned it yellow. But so if you look at, let me see if I can get a good, maybe this might not be the best. Okay, so let me see if I can get it as close as possible. Can you guys see? Okay, so if you look up here on the belly, single scale. But if you get to the, maybe you can't really see that well, but see how you sort of see a double row of scales? Can you guys see that? It's kind of hard to see. I'm sorry. It's and plus the snake is not cooperating. It's trying to get away. And they like to tangle themselves in all my cords and cause, come here. Yeah, he's really, really active. Anyways, yeah, there we go. Perfect. Sort of. Double row, double row, double row, and then the cloaca, and then single row, single row, single row, single row. Okay, so this is a useful tool if you find sheds in your yard. So again, this is that's a corn snake, and let me move on to some of these other snakes and get this guy to calm down, because he is, where did I put 1 minute, I lost the lid. Where I put the lid? All right. Well, the lid has disappeared. Okay, well, that's no big deal. I'll keep an eye on them. All right, let me show you. Come on. Okay, so all right, a note on the Venom Yield, because I want to talk a little bit. Well, actually, you know what? Before I get into this, because I know I skipped around, I did this sort of backwards. Let's do the Cottonmouth now. So the Eastern Cottonmouth is also known as water moccasin, is in the same genus as the Copperhead, except that they only live in the southeastern part of Virginia. And so any of these in Charlottesville or Albemarle, anywhere there. The northernmost population of these guys is right here, which is Chesterfield County, just south of Richmond. But it's a very small population. It's only found in one state park. But it's really around where the Appomattox and the James River kind of converge. That's the northernmost population, and it's not that many. Now, if you really want to see water moccasins in the wild, where you literally could trip on them, there's so many, go down here. See right there. That's Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge in Virginia Beach. It is riddled with cottonmouths and also brown and northern water snakes, plain belly water snakes. Really cool wildlife refuge. If you ever make it down to the southeastern part of the state, there's a state park, which is even like, it's like the state park is all the way at the tip of this little barrier island here. And it is a cool state park, and that's, you can also find legless lizards. You can find like rainbow snakes and like really rare, neat stuff alongside millions of water moccasins. Now, let me show you a water moccasin. Now, oh, this guy's a little bit feisty, but let me see if I can get him to calm down, and I will. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. Okay, so this is what just a boring brown drab, doesn't look like much, water moccasin, but dangerous snake. The venom toxicity of these guys is a lot more dangerous than their cousins, the copperheads. So and the reason why they call them so notice, like, okay, and this guy's gonna be, it's a little bit hard to see the eyes on these guys because there we go. They have this crazy color pattern on the eyes, and it makes it very hard to see the pupils and whether they are vertical or not vertical. It looks like almost like they have two colored eyes. It's like really bright on top and really dark on the bottom. And of course, my lighting is not the best here, but so, but carefully, if you sit still long enough, you can see the heat sensing pit. Of course, you don't want to cooperate today, but it's right there. We go. You see that right in front of his eye? There it is, right in front of his eye. You can see that heat sensing pit. So, and again, these guys are, not a whole lot. I mean, they're very drab brown snakes. Their banding pattern sort of looks like that of a copperhead. They sort of tend to have similar, see how it's almost like, maybe like, but it's not quite as distinct as the copperheads with their banding pattern. And that's because they're in the same genus. They're closely related animals. But this is what a water moccasin up close and personal looks like. And the reason why they call them cottonmouths, because their defense mechanism is that they will coil up, they will open up their mouth, and it's bright, bright, bright white, and it looks like cotton. And that's their defense. And that's basically them saying, hey, get away from me. The way rattlesnakes rattle their tail, these guys will gape and just kind of, kind of follow you with their mouth open. But, and then if you don't heed that warning and you continue to mess with them, then they can and will strike to defend themselves. But again, you probably will not come across any of these if you're going around hiking in the mountains. And if you do, then either, we really need to re-educate ourselves on the distribution of these animals, or you're probably looking at a water snake, which is mistaken for these guys all the time because water snakes like to hang out in water. And so people just automatically assume a snake in water is clearly a water moccasin. Now you can see that right there, that's a picture of him, of one with the mouth open, and that's it. Now, I hear this all the time. Well, water moccasins will chase you. Water moccasins, no, they won't. A lot of times when snakes, what looks like them chasing you is a lot of them don't have very good eyesight. So all they know is that if they feel like they're in danger, they want to get to their safe, spot, their safe space, whether it's their burrow, whether it's the water, and you may be in their way. They need to get past you. So a lot of times what they will do is what looks like them moving towards you, like they're chasing you. All they want to do is get past you to get to where they need to go. So, but that oftentimes gets mistaken as the snakes chasing you. So the last venomous, the last venomous snakes in Virginia is the timber rattlesnake. And have two very distinct populations. We have the western part of the states, and you guys may come across some of these if you go hiking up in the Shenandoahs and some of these trail national wildlife or the national forest. You might definitely come across. They like rocky outcroppings and mountaintops. That's where they normally are found, but sometimes they do venture into more populated areas and towns and things like that. But their timber rattlesnakes, the southeastern portion of the population, which is found, again, Virginia Beach, I think Suffolk, Chesapeake, that area, they look a little different, and they're called the canebrake. And it was thought at one point that this population was a species of the timber. But when we did genetic analyses, it turns out that they're not quite a subspecies yet. At least maybe not yet. Give it a couple 100,000 years, who knows what's going to happen. But they do behave differently. They act differently. They eat different things. They don't brumate. They brumate or hibernate. Brumation is actually the correct term for snakes. They don't truly hibernate, but they brumate. They got a different brumating pattern than their cousins in the mountains. And if you look at the statewide, not just the United States wide distribution of this, you can see why there's this huge gap. And this, we think, has to do with glaciation patterns. When the glaciers receded, or when the glaciers came down, it split the population. And then when the glaciers receded, now you're seeing a huge kind of gap here. And why these animals are now behaving a little different. Now, eventually, after a couple thousand years, however long, the southern population and this more northern and western population could potentially speciate into different species, depending on the difference, like the pressures. And then we could have things like hybridization zones, which we see a lot in many species of animals. But let me show you a real life timber rattlesnake. This is a male. Oh, no, this is a female. I'm sorry. This is the big female. She came to me. She was donated to me from a gentleman who used to do educational activities and retired. And I'm gonna use a bigger hook, and I'm gonna stand up for this one because, you know, she can be a little bit, you know, a little bit feisty sometimes. So I don't want to kind of get caught in striking range. Um, and can you guys? Oh, let me turn off the share. Okay. And I'm wearing my headphones, but hopefully you'll be able to hear the rattle. Can you guys hear that? Yeah. So make sure. Okay. So this is a gorgeous. Let me do the rattle first. So here's the interesting thing about the rattles. A lot of snakes rattle their tail. Copperheads rattle their tail. Corn snakes rattle their tail. Rat snakes rattle their tail. So the question becomes, what came first, the behavior, or is it, or are all the other snakes mimicking the rattlesnake, or was behavior first and then the rattlesnakes just kind of perfected it? So, but as you can see, they moved that tail very fast. Now, this is a gorgeous female. You can see the head there. You can see the heat sensing pit. It's a little bit more obvious in the bigger snakes. And let me see if I can manipulate her a little bit. Yeah, there we go. See, see the heat sensing pit and the vertical eye slits. And of course, you know, she's, you know, sniffing around with her tongue. Say hi. There we go. See, she's posing a little bit better. Now, the interesting thing about these guys, their body patterns, that they have this sort of chevron, these chevron markings, these sort of dark chevron shaped, I guess, markings across the body, these bands, chevron bands, that's what they call them, and all over the body. And usually, as you go towards the back of the like towards the tail, they get darker. So they can be kind of brightly colored most of their body until you start getting towards the end in the tail, and then they become black, almost black. Now, these guys are, you know, they can be completely black. I've seen very black rattlesnakes. They can be browner, they can be yellow, they can be or like somewhere in between. They come, like many other of our species of snakes, have different color variations depending on their location, their habitat, and you know. But at the end of the day, they will always have the same markings, these chevrons, and they'll have a sort of a either like brownish or a light brown stripe that goes all the way from the tip of the head all the way down their entire body. And, you know, and of course, if you hear this sound in nature, that means you're near a timber rattlesnake, and you should probably pay attention to where you're putting your feet. Now, another interesting thing about these guys is that they don't really like to rattle a whole lot, except for this one. This one likes to rattle a lot. But a lot of them would rather rely on their camouflage. And there have been a number of times when I've almost stepped on these guys because they tend to curl up in a nice little like, you know, just coil up and just like, okay, you don't see me, you don't see me, you don't see me, you don't see me, until even almost stepping on them, they still don't rattle. And so, which is an interesting adaptation, because what we think is happening is that the snakes that actually rattle and draw attention to themselves end up getting cut in half by a shovel or shot. So I think we're unknowingly selecting their behavior to have them not rattle as much, which ultimately will lead to a reduced rattle in a lot of these populations. Kind of like the hunters in Africa, the poachers that are killing a lot of the elephants with the big tusks. They're removing big tusk elephants out of the gene pool, and what's left is elephants with small or no tusks. So it's the same concept with these guys. And there goes that tail again. Isn't that kind of neat? I don't think you're able to get this close to a rattlesnake through a screen. There's his face again. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful animals. Grossly misunderstood. As far as rattlesnakes are concerned, these guys are probably one of the most docile ones, especially when you compare them to the Western Diamondbacks. And Western Diamondbacks are just, ooh, they're ugly. They're very defensive snakes. These guys, not so much. They tend to be a lot calmer. They got a pretty calm temperament. But again, if you don't heed the warning of the rattle, they will bite. And a bite from these guys is not pretty. Let me show you the Venom Yield. Yeah, right here. So just to show you, so the black bar here is the estimated lethal dose for an adult human. So with a copperhead, it takes about 100 milligrams of venom to kill a human. The red bar is the highest average of an adult copperhead when he injected. They can't really give you more than about 70 milligrams, and that's like a high yield. And the lowest yield they give you is about 40. So even if they give you a full-blown two-fang bite, an adult large female, it's still not enough venom to really kill an adult human. Now, there's caveats to this, of course, and that has to do a lot with your genetic predisposition, a lot of different things, and also whether you've been exposed to the venom before. You could develop anaphylactic shock, which will kill you. The anaphylactic shock will kill you quicker than any venom will. Now, when you look at the Cottonmouth, on the other hand, the lethal dose, the black bar, is about, what is that? About 100 milligrams. And the lowest yield is about 100 milligrams, and they can even give you 150 milligrams. So Cottonmouth are definitely much more dangerous and could potentially die from a cottonmouth bite if you don't get treated. And then look at the Timber Rattlesnake, which is the most dangerous of the three. About 80 milligrams is enough to kill a human, while the low yield is 100. So even if they don't give you a full-blown bite, you are still getting enough venom to kill you. And if they give you a full-blown bite, they give enough to kill 2 humans in one bite. So the timbers and a cottonmouth, definitely a lot more dangerous. Copperhead bites, normally you have a bad few days, but you normally recover. Sometimes they can cause a little bit of nerve damage. I've heard of anecdotal stories of people being bit, and at the site of the bite, they've lost sensation. So I think there's probably some nerve damage issue. But other than that, and it's very localized, it's not widespread, but other than that, most people recover relatively quickly. And the same is with pets, like dogs or even cats. Very rarely do copperheads kill dogs or cats, even if they don't get treated with antivenom. Now, the recommendation, if you do get bit, and this is on our website, so I can, you can probably go on our website and pull this down. But, what the first thing you want to do, no matter if it's a copper or whatever, you want to get medical help as quickly as you can and stay calm. Stay calm, because if you get really excited, which I know it's hard not to if you just got bit by a venomous snake, but the faster your heart beats, the quicker the venom starts spreading through your system. So try to stay calm as much as possible. The first thing you want to do is mark the bite. Mark it with a Sharpie. so that the doctors know exactly where you got bit, because sometimes you can't see there's not a whole lot of blood. You can't really see the puncture wounds, but just circle it with a Sharpie and restrict movement as much as possible. If you have material to make a loose splint, loose key, do not tourniquet. That's a recipe for amputation. Don't ever tourniquet a snake bite, but you can splint it very loosely to help restrict the movement, because movement, what happens is with movement, your muscles, as they contract and expand, they're also helping to pump blood. So the idea is you want to keep the venom as localized as possible so it's not causing more systemic problems. So try to keep the affected area higher than the heart level, or at least at heart level if it's on your arms. Now, this was a little different than what we thought before, to keep it below heart, but they want, keep it at heart or above heart if you can. And then, of course, if you get bit on your hand, remove any rings, anything like that, because you will swell. And if you have rings on, that's going to cause a lot of problems. And then, monitor vital signs, temperature, pulse, rate, breathing, if you can. There's actually some apps you can download that if you get bit, you can start to document some of this stuff. And if swelling occurs, mark the extent of the swelling with a marker. So as the venom moves, you're going to start getting swollen. So you can say, okay, after an hour, my wrist is now swollen. After another hour, now it's up to here, and you start to mark. And actually, the doctors sometimes will do that when you're there. So what not to do? So that's what you want to do. Basically, you get bit, get to a hospital as soon as you can, as quickly as possible. But what you don't want to do is don't become overexerted. Don't get too excited. Do not apply a tourniquet. Don't apply any cold compresses or to a snake bite. You do not want to numb the area. Don't cut into it. Don't try to suck the venom out. Don't take any stimulants or any pain medications unless you're at the emergency room and the doctor prescribes them. And do not give the person anything by mouth except for maybe water, because some of these venom can cause you to throw up, and sometimes you can choke on your vomit. So basically, is stay calm and get to a doctor and to an emergency room as quickly as possible. Always bring a first aid kit with you so you can at least bandage. You can bandage the area if you want, but just don't apply a lot of pressure. Okay. And this document, this specific one here, is on our website, and you can download it for free. Okay. So I'm just going to go over just a few of our species that you will more than likely come across. One of the more common ones is the northern water snake. And these guys come in all, as you can see here, this is all the same species, but they come in different, color patterns. Sometimes they're very bland like this, but oftentimes you'll notice these bands, and the bands are opposite of a copperhead. They're thin on the side and thick on top, whereas the copperhead has them thick on the side and thin on top. And these guys are found statewide in almost every body of water. If you see a snake in the water anywhere, other than maybe southwestern Virginia, it's more than likely actually anywhere other than southwestern Virginia, if you see a snake swimming in the water, it's 99.9% a northern water snake. I mean, nobody ever said a copperhead can't swim. Nobody ever said any other species of snake can't swim, and a lot of them do. The ones that really hunt and live in the water are the northern water snakes, and they're usually banded. And you'll know one because you will more than likely smell it. These guys musk. And when they musk, if you grab one, which I have many times, they will take their tail and they will just try to cover you in their musk. And it's the most foul smelling thing. It's pretty disgusting. So again, northern water snakes. And unfortunately, I don't have one of these to show you. Now, one thing real quick. How many times have you guys heard about black snakes? Which one of these is black snake? Well, they're all black snakes, but there's no such thing as a black snake in Virginia. What we have is black racers, black rat snakes, now called eastern rat snakes. We can have other like hognose snakes or even rattlesnakes that are black because they're, or eastern black king snakes. So there's really no such thing as a black snake, but we do have a few species of snakes that are black. Most predominantly is the eastern rat snake, also known as the black rat snake, and I have one here. And let me grab them. Come on. So this is an eastern rat snake, and I will stop sharing again because otherwise you can't see. Okay. Eastern rat snake, again, he's got very dark eyes, so you can't see the pupils, but he's lacking a heat sensing pit. And the juveniles are patterned, but as they get older, like this one, the pattern starts to disappear, although you can sort of still see the pattern a little bit. But again, usually they become very jet black as they become adults. And so one interesting concept, and one thing is that rat snakes will have dark black on top and the entire length of the body will be light colored, as opposed to the black racers, which are black all the way around, except for the racers will only have white underneath the chin. So if the snake is black or white underneath, but black on top, that's a rat snake, not a racer. That's one way to tell them apart. These guys are excellent, excellent, excellent climbers. They will get into your attic. They will get into trees. They love eating eggs. They are the largest and the most common snake we have in Virginia. So chances are, and it's black, it's one of these guys. So again, eastern rat snake, very noticeable, just big black snake. You see a big black snake, eastern rat snake. One thing about them though is that when they're juveniles, they're patterned. And also, well, let me show you this. So that's how they get, that's how they're able to get into your attic. They can climb straight up the side of a tree or a brick house. And if your attic vents aren't quite sealed properly, they will get into your attic. Or sometimes what they do is they get into your crawl space and make their way through your pipe chases up into your attic or elsewhere in your house. They can do that. You will oftentimes see them looking like this really weird zigzag pattern. That's very unique to rat snakes. I'm not sure. Well, I think because this zigzag pattern allows them to really get into, to really get a grip on the bark or on a brick house or something like that. But they can literally climb straight up the side of a house or a tree. And I show that with them when I do my live presentation. Actually, and if we're outside, I will put these guys on a tree. And it's like, yep, check it. And people are just like, wow. I mean, it's like Spider-Man. It's crazy. So the other black snake that is common and it's statewide distributed is the racer. And the racers are much more slender, and they call them racers for a reason. These guys are fast. And when I say fast, it's good luck catching them, because as soon as they see you, they're gone. And if you do catch one, good luck not getting bit, because these guys don't like to be touched and they will bite. Sometimes you can, even the wild ones, you can grab one if you're careful and gentle, and the racers, nah, they will bite. But fully black, and it's the bad picture here because actually right over here. See underneath right there is just the chin. That's white. Now what this racer is doing, it's called telescoping. He's in the grass, he's moving, and every once in a while they'll kind of poke up, see what's going on, and then back down. So this is what a black racer looks like when it's a juvenile. Again, it's got patterns. It's got these little blotches. And one thing about juvenile black racers is that they got these huge eyes, almost like puppies. You know how puppies, sometimes they grow up or they have big paws and they kind of grow into them. Well, these guys will have these huge eyes, and it looks like, you know, they grow into them. So just to show you the different snake and a baby, you know, baby rat snake and a baby racer. They both are patterned. They both lose the patterns as they get older. All right, and I'm gonna try to speed up here because I know I'm out of time. Again, I showed you the corn snake before. It is, you know, you find these guys throughout the state, not in every county. We don't see them in the southeastern part of the state. We see them mostly in the, you know, northwest and central part of the state, but they come in, you know, various colors. Most of them will, you know, this is kind of like the one that I showed you. He's got a little bit more grayer. This was a Henrico, but they can be red like this, or they can be, you know, more, you know, lighter color. But they again, very variable coloration. Fairly common. If you find one, it's really cool. We don't see them too much, but they're there. Again, they got these like sort of these blotches, these blocks, and then alternating on the side. So big blotch on the top, alternating blotch on the side, kind of like that. Then of course we have our garter snakes. These guys are sort of all over the place as well, statewide distributed. How do you know it's a garter snake? Does it have this bright yellow line and a checkered looking body? That's a garter snake. So again, sometimes near water, they are garter snakes, not garden snakes. And they also have a very red tongue with a black tip. And you can't really see the black tip because he's in the process of flickering here. But again, this bright yellow line and this checkered sort of body. That's a garter snake. And then one of my favorite snakes is the hognose snake. And again, very variable. They can be brown, they can be black, they can be a mixture of both. But the unique thing about hognose snakes is this. They have a very unique defense mechanism. They are the actors of the snake world. And I will show you what I mean. And you're not going to be able to hear. Oh, well, this is what they do. Well, let me show you what they do in a video, because, and you can't hear it, and I'll explain what he's doing. So right now, this hognose snake is puffing out like a cobra, and he is hissing really loudly. He's doing that. What he also does is he fake strikes. It's a bluff. They either strike with their mouth open or with their mouth closed, but they never bite. But what they do is they make themselves look big and ugly. And then if you continue to mess with them, what they end up doing is they give up and they play dead. They start writhing around like they're dying. They stick their tongue out. They're like, oh, leave me alone. Oftentimes they will regurgitate if they've eaten or defecate, just to make themselves look as less appealing as possible. If you try to turn them right side up, they will turn themselves upside down again, because they're dead. And when you're dead, you're obviously upside down. So they're really kind of very neat snakes. They do this really interesting behavior. No other snake that I know of anywhere in the world does this. So yeah, so they're dead. And then after a while, you kind of let them go, or they feel like they've had enough. Yeah, so you can they're like, nope, I'm dead. And nothing you can do to convince them otherwise. They're just, he's dead. You killed it. Now leave it alone because it's dead, right? Yeah, apparently it works, because every single eastern hognose snake does this. And they're very specialist eaters. These guys only eat toads. So they don't make very good captive unless you have a readily available supply of toads. All right. At the end, this is it pretty much. I want to show you one more snake because it's St. Patrick's Day. And let me put this guy back. And I will show you the only green snake that I have. let me, hold on a second. Let me stop sharing. Now, this is the only, so this snake, by the way, is that snake, that very snake. A friend of mine took that picture. It is Asian pit viper, a tree viper that they live in, Myanmar and Thailand and that area. And they live in the tree canopy. And this is the only snake, and I've had this guy since he was a very teeny tiny baby. But this is the only snake, because it's St. Patrick's Day, I got to show you a green snake. Turn around. There we go. The only snake that has ever bit me and sent me to the hospital for 36 hours. This very guy right here. We got into an argument and I lost. But again, it's a pit viper. So you can see the heat sensing pit and the vertical eyes, although they're a little bit dilated now. But I got lucky with the bite from him because it wasn't a severe envenomation. He only got me with one fang, and he had been biting that I was trying to feed it the entire night. And so he didn't have a whole lot of venom left when he got me. Still enough to put me in a hospital for 36 hours. Luckily, I did not need antivenom. If I would have needed antivenom, we would have had to get it from a zoo because there's no FDA approved antivenom for exotic species like this one. And, the reason why I was in a hospital for 36 hours was because one of the mode of action of their venom is that they cause blood to coagulate. And what happens is, so that your blood uses up all the coagulation factors, and then another component of the venom actually starts lysing the blood vessels, and so you end up bleeding to death internally. So I had blood clots going through my body for it took about 36 hours for my levels to come back to normal. And that was I got lucky because this snake could have killed me, potentially. And it's a tree viper, so they hang out in trees, in a canopy. They camouflage. I mean, you can imagine in a jungle of in the jungle of Thailand, and these little guys are all over the place, and sometimes they're at head level. They hang out in trees, bushes, brushes. He saw me. He didn't like this hand movement. He's looking at me. Right now, what he is doing is a very strike position. Let me see if I can turn him around. Well, now I've discombobulated him. But he turned around. He was in strike mode. He could strike me right now from this position. He will strike the length of this. Woo! See, there he goes again. Of that pivot. And that goes to show to be very careful with these guys because they can strike in any direction. And so long as you are away of the reach, I didn't think he saw me, but he did. But they are, very fast and very, they pay attention. They know he's looking right at me. He's, him and I have this love-hate relationship. So, but that's an exotic species, one of my favorite, and the only snake, the only one that's ever gotten me. Very cool, huh? So that's all I have. I got other snakes if you want to see them. I know it's way past my time. I apologize for that. It's just that when I get into showing snake mode, it gets, but I hope it was enjoyable and that you guys learned something. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or if you want to shoot me an email, or, happy to do that.
Well, thanks, Larry. That was fascinating, and I was holding my breath on that last one.
Yeah, that was that caught me off guard because I didn't think he saw me. But that's exactly the problem, is that when you start to get too comfortable with them, that's when they surprise you, and that's with any snake. And so that's when accidents happen. In this hobby with venomous snakes, the saying is, it's not if you get bit, it's when you get bit, because statistically, the more you handle these guys, you're gonna make a mistake. I mean, it's human nature. There's no such thing as a perfect human, but snakes rarely miss. And so, but yeah, they're unpredictable. So you never, ever, ever get comfortable with them.
So if anybody has questions, you could unmute yourself temporarily or put it into chat. If I don't know how long you want to stick around, Larry. It sounds like you've got other
I
things
got
going
nothing
on.
to do, so I am here. I'm done for the night. So
Okay.
I'm happy to sit as long as you guys are willing to sit. I can show you more animals if you want.
Heidi, yeah, go ahead.
No more pit vipers, though. We don't want to see you get bit. I wanted to ask you, you have them in these containers. Is that how they live? I mean,
Oh, no. I have them in the containers only for the purposes of the purpose. I only have them in the containers just so it's easy for me to get them and show you. I put them back in their enclosures because otherwise I have to wrestle with them out of their enclosures. It's just easier to keep them here with me so I can just easily get them in and out.
uh-huh.
And when I bring these guys out in public for display purposes, for educational talks, they're in. I have enclosures that are designed for public displaying and very safe and locked and things like that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
Larry. Thank you. This has been great. So we hike a lot in the park, and we just last year started backpacking again. We were in St. Mary's Wilderness, and so my question is: so snakes don't hibernate, but when do they start coming out? And also, are the juveniles, the babies, like the copperheads, are they more venomous, or is their venom more concentrated than the adults?
So all right, so the first part of when they don't have, so what snakes do when it gets cold is they go underground, or they go they just got to get right below the frost line so that they can survive the winter. But they're not hibernators. In other words, they don't go into like a deep sleep like bats or bears. They actually are active during the winter. They're people have done studies where they've stuck cameras down in these hibernaculum, and they're active. They're moving around. They're very aware. And actually, even in the winter time, it's not uncommon on a warm winter day, which we tend to be having more and more of these days, because climate change is a hoax, apparently, right? They can come out during the winter and actually hunt for or search for water. And sometimes they will, it's called brumation in these, in areas where they have easy access to water. And then when the weather starts to get constantly warm, they start coming out more and more. But what they normally do is they come out for a little bit, depending on the species. Every species does something a little different. But they'll come out and maybe they'll stick around their den site for a little bit, for maybe a few weeks, until the weather really gets consistently warm enough. And then they start to, then it's like, hey, spring mode, they start looking for mates, they're hunting. And then in the summertime, when it gets really hot, a lot of them actually become nocturnal, because during the day it's way too hot. So they actually go into their dens during the day and they come out at night. I know copperheads do that. Copperheads don't tolerate very hot weather. Anything above 80 degrees, forget it. You're not going to see a copperhead. I mean, you might if it's in the shade, or but they're not going to be very active. But you can go at night with a headlamp and see them hunting frogs and things like that. So it's usually around, actually now I've seen snakes out now. So you could potentially come across snakes. This week, I don't know what it's like in Charlottesville, but here in Richmond, it's been about, 40, 50 degrees. So probably not a whole lot of snake activity. But last week it was like 70, 75 degrees,
Yeah.
And snakes were out, and I know they were out because I found some. So, but they'll go back into their dens when it gets cooler until they're more comfortable. You know, but they always like their den sites. They don't like copperheads will stick around their den sites pretty much. You know, they will, you know, leave. They'll go hunt. They'll go mate, but they usually a den site, and it's not uncommon to see different species denning together in the winter. So copperheads can den with you know, rattlesnakes and even corn snakes, even racers. Interesting thing is that racers eat copperheads, but they sometimes den and overwinter together. I guess when springtime comes, though, it's like, yep, coppers, all right, see it, you know. but you know, but it's not uncommon to see that. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys remember when my title screen of my presentation, it had a copperhead and a corn snake huddled together, and we found them just like that underneath a rock that we lifted at the Shenandoah River State Park. And you know, I'm pretty sure the parents weren't in agreement with that relationship, but they were able to sneak out and they were cuddling together, which is it was a very cool find to see both of them kind of. That's like we call it a twofer, you know, 2 for 1. You know, it's like a copperhead and a corn snake all underneath one rock. That's like never. That happened once, and it has not happened again in the service. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then what about? Yes, thank you. So when the babies, so we've heard anecdotally about the
Yes.
venom of the.
Right, the second part of the question. So, you know, venom composition does change from young to adult, but not but baby or juveniles don't have more potent venom necessarily, and certainly it's a lot less yield because they're smaller. So if I were to have a choice of getting bit by an adult or a juvenile, I would pick the juvenile 100% of the time because volume. The more babies don't have a whole lot, so you know, you're better off. Their venom is not any more concentrated. I think that comes from the idea that they're smaller, so things get, you know, more concentrated, but that's an old wives' tale. And also, we don't really know if juveniles or adults, how and if they're able to even control, like on, you know, on purpose, how much venom or to not envenomate. You know, there was an old thing that, you know, babies can't really control their venom injection, so they're going to give you a full dose. That's why they're more dangerous. That's not necessarily true. There's no evidence for that. What we do know is across the board, 20% of bites can be dry. 20%.
Okay, thank
So
you.
if you see baby snakes, you know, and you get bit by a baby snake, you know, a copperhead anyway, you know, you still go to you treat it as if it was the deadliest. I mean, when people ask me what's the most dangerous snake in the world, my response is always the one that just bit you, because it doesn't matter. I mean, a copperhead, even though it's not as toxic, you could still have issues, especially if you have predisposed conditions and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Larry,
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one that I normally talk about, and I totally forgot to talk about it, but that's a great question. Yeah.
Larry,
Yep.
Craig Ferris, I don't know if he wants to speak for himself, but he put a question in the chat that he
Oh.
lives in West Virginia, and is it, oh, can you relocate snakes?
Great question. In Virginia, you cannot relocate them. Well, you can't do it unless you're permitted to do so, and you got to have a wildlife rehabilitation permit from the Department of Wildlife Resources. There are constraints. You cannot, and it used to be that you couldn't relocate snakes anywhere. So because of mostly because of disease spread, but certainly even wildlife rehabilitators are not allowed to relocate any snake from one county to another. The biggest reason is this: we have a snake plague going on right now. It's a fungal disease, kind of like bats and kind of like with the frogs. There's a snake fungal disease that's spreading throughout Virginia and it's wiping out snakes. So that reason alone is enough to get Department of Wildlife Resources to ban any type of relocation. The other reason is that a lot of snakes have a pretty well-defined home range, right? Which could be a few miles, could be, you know, but they have their drinking spots, they have their feeding spots, their you know, sleeping spots. And when you take them somewhere else, it's sort of like, you know, blindfolding you, taking you to China, dropping you off in the middle of somewhere and saying, okay, good luck. You might survive, but you might not. You know, you might be completely out of your element. And that's the same thing with snakes. So when you take them out of their home range, it's kind of like, well, you know, some might find water and food and, you know, but there's a lot of competition. And oftentimes, you know, they, you know, and especially if you relocate them late in the season, they're not going to have time to find a proper den site for brumation, and they'll die.
Hey, Larry, this is Craig.
Yeah.
The last part was kind of what I was wondering, because we have timber rattlers, you know, around the house, and we called a biologist and they said, well, don't relocate them because of that range issue.
Yeah.
But we've got, you know, we're on several hundred acres. So if we take them, you know, maybe a quarter mile or half mile away, do you think that would be
That's
okay?
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
if you do, because I get, but see, the problem is they'll come back, you know,
Oh,
because your house is right in the middle of their range, their home range.
right, right.
So I mean, but the question is, why are they around your house? So normally snakes will stick around an area unless they're just passing through, but they'll stick around if they have food, water, and shelter. So
Mhm.
if you make your immediate yard snake unfriendly, and this is what I used to do when I used to do the snake removal job that I had. Most of the time, I would never find the snakes. I would find the sheds or whatever. But what I would consult on is how to make your home and your yard snake unfriendly. And the
Yeah.
way to do that is to try to, you know, if you have wood piles, that is going to attract their prey. If you have, you know, a pond, that's going to attract the prey items that these guys, and also water. But if you keep a clean yard, you keep the grass mowed, not that they're not going to show up, but it's less likely for them to stick around because they don't really have a lot. There's not much there for them. But if you make it, you know, where they have shelter, food, and water, they can oftentimes stick around for at least for a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We live in the kind of in the woods. And so
Yeah,
we're
it's kinda
never
hard.
very far from the woods, and there's springs and stuff. So we don't see a lot of them, but occasionally, you know.
So, you know, I mean, do you have pets and young kids or?
Yeah, we
anybody?
have dogs.
So yeah, and rattlesnakes can be obviously, you know, copperheads, you know, wouldn't be too worried. You know, even if they get bit, they do very well. They recover well,
Mhm.
even without antivenom. But rattlesnakes, that's a different story. And you know, yeah, with dogs is a little tricky because if you let them out, you know, I don't know if you guys walk them or if you just
They're
let 'em-
outside most of the time on their own.
Yeah. Have you ever had an incident?
No, and we're trying to teach the dogs to respect the snakes, and they're really good at that. We've got lots of black snakes, and they know not to mess with them. And the rattlesnakes, you know, same thing. So I think they've got the message. So I'm less worried now than I used to be. But
Yeah. So
just-
you can actually do snake aversion training, and there are people that do that. I
Mhm.
can find that info for you if you're interested in doing that. It's basically teach the dogs to stay away from the snakes.
Yeah.
And to just, you know, there's a snake, they recognize the smell, and they, you know, they have a, you know, it's all dogs. It's either, you know, positive or negative conditioning kind of thing. And so usually you let them smell the snake, you show them, you know, like a snake, and then you, like, I don't know, do something that's unpleasant for them, and they connect
Mhm.
that snake in order with an unpleasant thing, and they stay away. There's people that do that, and apparently, from what I hear, it's pretty successful if you do it correctly and you spend the time to do that.
Okay.
But as far as keeping them out of your house, especially if you live where you're in their home, you know.
Right. Oh, we're not, I like having the black snakes. Just, the occasional rattlesnake that just worries us. But thanks, I appreciate that. That was
How
helpful.
often have you lived in that area, in that house?
Well, we've lived in this house for about 4 years. We've had a cabin out here for years before that. And so now the rattlesnakes, we don't see them as much. And so I think that they've kind of moved out.
Probably.
Or at least
I mean,
whatever, we didn't see them.
Sometimes if you see a rattlesnake or any snake in your yard and you take like a broom with, and you sort of kind of like, not hit it, but sort of shoo it. Sometimes the snakes say, ooh, that's weird. Like, what is this? And they connect that area to like a negative.
Huh.
And so sometimes they tend to like, I'm not going back there. I remember last time I was there, there was this weird, thing that brushed up against me or something. So I know sometimes that seems to work well for some people. But I sometimes talk to people that lived in a house for years, 10, 20 years. Not once have they seen a copperhead. In 1 year, they see one. And then they start freaking out. And what I tell them is like, no, they've been here this whole time. You've just never seen them, because they will leave you alone. They're like any other. Now, accidents can happen if you're gardening and but it's rare. It happens, but it's rare. But it's like you can coexist with these animals very easily if you, just do some, pay attention to where you're putting your, like if you're doing gardening, take a shovel or a rake or something and, kind of shake things first before you start sticking your hand, especially if you're in an area where there's copperheads and rattlesnakes, just kind of, disturb the area you're going to be working in before you start putting your hands in there. And that's one way to avoid getting bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thanks a lot. Great talk, by the way. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh, I want to show you, before you go, I'll show you one more cool thing. It's not a snake, but I can hear you guys because I got my headphones. But so if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. But I want to show you this thing real quick.
Do black rat snakes eat copperheads?
Black rat snakes do not do, and king snakes will eat rattlesnakes and copperheads. I'll show you this little guy. It's a lizard, obviously, but this is a Gila monster. And Gila monsters are the only venomous lizard we have in the United States, and they live in the Sonoran Desert, southwestern U.S. And it's a venomous lizard, but this one specific is a puppy. Her name's, see how her head, she moves up. She moves her head up when I rub her head. She does. Her name is Persephone, and she's a very long-term wild-caught animal from somebody collected her illegally in Arizona, because it's illegal to collect them in Arizona because they're endangered, and got confiscated. But once you remove animals from the wild after a certain amount of time, depending on the species, see how she's moving her head, but depending on in Virginia, if you take a snake and remove him from the wild and you keep him for longer than I think it's a few weeks, you can't re-release him back in the wild. But see the head, see how bumpy that head is? That's actually the way the skull of these guys looks. It's pretty neat, huh? Very prehistoric animals. And these guys, the venom gland the venom is on the bottom, the bottom jaw right there. That's the venom gland, is right here. And when they bite, they have a strong, when they bite, they don't let go. And that pressure pushes on the gums, which then releases the venom. It's not deadly to humans, but it's excruciatingly painful from what I hear. But she's just a sweetheart. She's as docile can be. She's never been aggressive towards me. And this is the only venomous feel comfortable just handling like this. Now, the way I'm holding her, by the way, is the correct way to hold these guys to avoid getting bit. Now, of course, when I put my hand in front of her, but this is the correct way. They usually have a fatter tail. She's kind of getting a little skinny, but, and they're very just rugged, they got these long claws because they live in a desert and they burrow, and they're very inactive for most of the year. Once or twice a year, they'll get up, look for food, and then they go right back in sleep mode or until they're looking. So they're very lazy animals, very lazy. Pretty neat though, huh? They breed them in the pet trade. You know, there's a few people that breed these guys, you know, captive bred, and they run like $2,000 each or something. It's crazy the amount of money people are making from breeding them. This one was donated to me again.
Larry, Virginia Doherty had a question. Virginia, do you want to ask?
Sure.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, I heard that if you were bitten by a copperhead and had to have the anti-venom, that it cost $30,000. Is that true?
Well, it can. Probably not for a copperhead because you don't really need that. Well, you know, not that much, but a severe rattlesnake envenomation. So what happens is this: there's two now, but there's one main one. One company that makes pit viper antivenom that is used to treat all pit viper bites. So copperhead, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, even the rattlesnakes from all the rest of the country. And so there's no company. Well, there's now another company, a Mexican company that is now selling the antivenom. It's been FDA approved in the United States. There was a long legal battle over it. Anyways, long story short. But so lack of competition, you know, there's only one company and now two. So not a whole lot to shop around for a bargain. And so because of that, and because of the way our healthcare system and the way our insurance companies work, makes what costs about it costs $15 per vial to make antivenom, $15. By the time it goes through the medical system with the insurance, and by the time it gets into your arm, you can be looking at a $5,000, if not more, dollars, 5,000, sometimes even 10,000 a vial. So say you need 30 vials. Yeah. I have seen, I've heard of really severe envenomations, of rattlesnake envenomations, that end up costing over $150,000.
Wow.
And if you don't have insurance, that's it. What do you do? So it is expensive, but not necessarily because it's expensive to make. It's because we have very crappy healthcare in this country. So, and the insurance companies, you know, and all of it, it's the whole process. I mean, but very little is production. Very little is research, because we have it, we know it works. The research's been done years ago. It's all, yeah. So Leslie Boyer is a retired researcher physician at University of Arizona. She started the Viper Institute at University of Arizona, and their sole, this institute is they research antivenom. But Leslie Boyer, she did a study. She looked at the cost of antivenom in this country, and also she does work elsewhere, like in Africa and all that. And she broke it down on why antivenom is so expensive in this country. It's ridiculous, but yes, it can be an extremely expensive hospital bill. Like it's like 90% of a hospital bill, if you get a severe envenomation, is the pharmacy cost because of the antivenom.
What did your trip to the hospital end up costing?
Mine only cost like a few $1,000 because I did not need antivenom, but also the antivenom I would have gotten would have had to been sent in from the either Richmond Zoo. What's funny is when you get bit by an exotic animal or an exotic snake, the poison control center, the regional poison control center, has a database that they can access, and they know exactly where certain antivenom is. So, but I have a lot of connections here in Richmond, and also the zoos definitely have antivenom. And I called my buddy on my way to the hospital right before I almost passed out because my blood pressure dropped tremendously about like 30 minutes after I got bit. And I thought I was going to get to the hospital like completely out. But I came out of it after about 10 minutes. I felt much better. But I called him and I said, hey, I got bit by my tree viper. I said, does Richmond Zoo have any venom for this? Let me check. I'll call you back. Turns out they did. When I went to the hospital, because of the mild envenomation, I mean, my hands swell a little bit, not too much, but because it was mild, you know, I told the doctor, and I have a snake bite protocol that I brought with me. I come prepared. I'm not just showing up here. And I said, listen, I was like, here's a snake bite protocol. This is a species that bit me. Here's what we should do. I said, I don't think I need antivenom, but again, I will rely on your expertise. But a lot of doctors have no idea to treat snake bites. So, no, I mean, because they don't see them often, especially exotic snakes. When was the last time anybody in Virginia had to treat a pit viper from Thailand, bite? So he was like, well, thanks for bringing this information. I can make a copy of this. I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it talks about the type of antibody, first aid treatment, all types of, care. But eventually what he was telling, what they wanted to do, said, well, we might have to get you some antivenom. I think most of us agree you should get antivenom. We're going to get it helicoptered in from the Buffalo Zoo. I said, what? I said, hold on. I said, no. I said, call this number. It'll save both of us money. Trust me. Because helivacing antivenom is not cheap either. And plus you have to then replace, so you have to pay for the antivenom that you used, but then you have to pay for the zoo to replace their stock because they're doing you a favor and you're taking away any venom that they need for their staff, the zookeepers, and things like that. So it becomes extremely costly. Now that is a cost I can understand because of the fact that we don't have FDA approved. So I get it. You got to pay for the shipping, for the permits and all that. What's ridiculous though is our native species FDA approved antivenoms cost that much. And it varies from hospital. You go to one hospital, it could be $500 a vial. You go to the hospital down the street and it could be $5,000 a vial. That's how much it varies. It's insane. Again, United States healthcare system. So, moral of the story, don't get bit by a snake, especially if you're broke and don't have insurance.
Okay, well, it looks like we've got all the questions answered. And Larry, this is such a great presentation.
Yeah, sorry I went so much over. And that's why I was asking if 8 o'clock was a hard stop. But I usually am able to engage people pretty well. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And next year, if things finally get better, and I got I work at VCU, so I got vaccinated, so I feel a little bit more comfortable with everything. But next year, if hopefully we can do this in person, and I can bring these animals in, and you can actually play with a lot of the non-venomous species.
Yeah.
I'll bring the green pit viper for you guys to see.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for sticking around.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, Donna, if you have my email address, feel free to give it out. And if people have questions about identification or anything, just send them my way.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Larry, thank you so much.
Bye.